Guess who just got out of the theater and watched Nosferatu? It is the only movie I have watched in a theater this year, but you know what? Better than nothing. But I actually do have a lot to say about it. This is the first movie I've seen from Robert Eggers. What's his name? This is the first movie I've seen from him, and it's quite the impression. There are things I like about it, things I feel about, but overall, I did enjoy the movie. I don't want to watch it again. It is a very extreme watch, and I at least need some time. I need like a few years before I can watch this again. From what I did watch, very enjoyable. If not a little long at some points, but I'll get into that. Firstly, I want to start off with the acting. The main character, I guess, is Nicholas Hoult, who plays Thomas, and he is the only character's name I remember other than Count Orlok. So if you're asking me who this is, that is the wife. Who is this? The doctor. Who is this? Ghost doctor. Demon doctor, I mean. Also, it's just Willem Dafoe. I'm just going to call him Willem Dafoe. But I've only seen one other movie from Nicholas Hoult, and that was The Menu, where he played almost the exact opposite character of this, being so focused on modern culture and like getting obsessed with social media, and then suddenly he's thrown into the 1800s and he's like loyal to his wife and stuff. The best way I can describe his performance in this movie is like, imagine that scene in The Menu where he makes that face, but imagine that like throughout the whole movie, and he actually does it pretty well. It doesn't feel too one note. That is the most like Englishmen pretending to be American, pretending to do an English accent I've ever heard. I do think there are parts where he just gets outacted by Bill and also Willem Dafoe. He gets outshined by him, but for a main character he does do a pretty good job, and I think he kind of keeps the tempo of the movie pretty solid. Also, the actress tends to outact him too, but for the most part he feels more like an anchor towards everything else in this movie rather than like being a character. And Nosferatu himself is a very disgusting creature in this movie. I think they did a good job at like making him different from the original source material while just acknowledging, okay, this is a much more disgusting, like evil version of Dracula. Instead of the Dracula that's like, blah, blah, this is just a demon. This is just a straight up demon. And you can feel that. You can feel like everything he does is evil. I'm annoyed by how many jump scares they make him do though. This is just more of like the theater I was in, but the movie was so fucking loud. And whenever they did a jump scare, like the first few times was like, ooh. But after a while, I was literally like doing this with one of my ears just covering it because it's so loud whenever they do a jump scare, and it just happens every once in a while. Like, oh, is there a moment where something evil is slightly happening? Jump scare, you know, and it happens and you get jumped. But yeah, the jump scares in this movie do get annoyed, and it feels more like a studio note thing where they just had to shove some stuff into the movie where it was like, it's a horror movie, you need jump scares. Some other modern things that annoyed me, the lighting in a few scenes I didn't like as much, but the lighting in most of this movie is actually pretty great. Especially in the first act, there's a lot of scenes that feel very expressionist, like when Thomas goes to Nosferatu's castle. There's a lot of shots there that focus on style over anything else, and it's really cool because all he's doing is just going to the castle, but they try to make it as stylistic as possible. And you see that throughout the movie. They have a lot of shots that are just focused on like being very, very cool. They have a lot of stuff that's just meant to look really awesome. And if there's one strength I can say this movie has, it's absolutely in how it shoots itself, the cinematography. And especially with the cameras they use, the lens they have are focused on just making the characters look extremely detailed. You can see every wrinkle on Willem Dafoe's face. And speaking of Willem Dafoe, his position in the third act was very, very fitting. The movie's third act loses a lot of pacing, especially because this movie is 2 hours, like 10 minutes. So you're looking at around 130 minutes of runtime, and you start to feel it near the end. I think they could have taken out maybe 30 minutes of this movie and it would have been perfectly fine. But again, so much of this movie has style in it that it kind of overshadows getting something across. To me, this movie focuses a lot more on the feeling of Nosferatu rather than any sort of logical conclusion. The ending of this movie, it left me more confused than like knowing what happened. Like, I get an idea of what happened, but it's like, okay, what about this and that? I couldn't really connect it as on my first watch at least, so it kind of left with a puzzling impression. Like, for example, Thomas leaving Count Orlok's castle. Like, they have around 5 minutes of him just like leaving the castle, and it's dramatic, and they have it, you know, feel like the rest of the movie, but you could have just cut that. It would have been perfectly fine. We would not have noticed. And I promise this isn't just like an attention span thing. I just feel the movie gets a little indulgent at points. And it comes at the cost of the movie's pacing. There's a lot of slow parts that just kind of don't really do much. But the parts that do. Again, the acting in this movie, when they act, they can act their ass off. Lily Rose Depp tried to make herself look as like disgusting as possible, and I don't think she pulled it off. I still think she was kind of attractive. She looked absolutely insane in this movie. She played a possession pretty well. Didn't watch the original Nosferatu, but this felt a lot more like Poltergeist than Nosferatu, but it was still cool nonetheless. And I'm gonna be a film snob here, but I feel like the possession parts were a little too modern for how I wanted this movie to feel. I like the possession scenes in this movie, but for the most part, it felt like something that just didn't really do anything new with it. It just kind of felt like a possession. And I gotta talk about how violent this movie is. Like I said, they do not hold back on making Count Orlok absolutely putrid. The way he sucks blood out of people is absolutely gross. He looks gross. They gave him like this stupid, like, comb over where it looks like this, but it's like this long strand on the side of his face. He's meant to look like a demon, absolutely nails it. And also the servant to Nosferatu, I forget his name, he is absolutely batshit insane in this movie, and he's one of my favorite characters. This guy is supposed to feel like he gave his life to Nosferatu, but I honestly don't know why. I don't know what the benefit was. The movie probably explained it, but it's just kind of... I was paying attention, but whoever played this guy absolutely acted his ass off. There's scenes where he's just biting the head of a pigeon and you could see the blood just squirt as like its heart keeps throbbing. Making Orlok this evil presence, that's what made the movie scary to me in a good way, rather than just kind of doing these other tricks that I've seen. What makes Orlok interesting is just how fucked up can he make everyone become. But what I like about Orlok, the things that make him scary aren't the possessions or the jump scares. It's just how like evil can he be in this movie. He is a demon. There are like no holdbacks. There are no restrictions on what he can do. And they do a pretty good job at just like making him evil. Kills the men, kills the women, and by God, even the children. And he doesn't just murder them either. It's like just these very vivid scenes. When you see him murder someone, it is on screen. It's not just like this, "Wah! No, it is just him sucking people on screen. And speaking of sucking people on screen, this movie kind of has a joke around of monster fucker, and yeah, there is sex, but it's in a way where it doesn't feel like the main theme of the movie, like some people are saying. Like, to me, a larger part of this movie just feels like corruption, and that Nosferatu is just like a corrupting thing. The atheists are gonna hate to hear this, but God is good in this movie, demons are bad. It's a very simple good or bad. Not only is he horny, but he's also just death. Like, he is the embodiment of death. My biggest criticisms of this movie, though, is that it's very long, and it doesn't have to be that way. And another example of that is the possessions. They go on for a while. There's a few scenes here and there that also go on for a while. Another thing, I kind of wish this movie had less dialogue, because again, this movie is so stylistic and visual that sometimes when people are talking over the visuals, especially in the, again, third act of the movie, it's kind of off-putting at certain points. If you need a good new horror movie to watch, I look no further. But again, for me, being 130 minutes, that is quite a while, and they don't use the most out of their time. I hope the director's cut of this movie actually chops it by 30 minutes. I think if he trimmed a lot of the fat in this movie, it wouldn't just be gripping, but the pacing would have been amazing, and it would have kept you on your feet the entire time. It's a slower horror movie. There's a lot of slow burning in this movie, so it's not exactly going to be like, ooh, but it's going to keep you engaged. If you're looking for something beautiful to look at, if you're looking for actors to act, good movie. But if you're looking for something with a story, this goes a lot more for feeling rather than trying to be cohesive. Again, I can kind of forgive it for being an adaptation of an adaptation, so there's kind of some loose ends here and there. That's just kind of me overanalyzing, but at the same time, I think they could have taken some liberty in being a little bit more cohesive and also just not being as big. I think there's a lot of scope in places that doesn't have to be scope. I think this could have just been a simple story about Dracula, but they just had some stuff in there that kind of made it a little more confusing along the way. If you like horror movies, go watch this. If you want a drama, go watch a drama. But if you want something very visual, go watch this.